find a good background picture, but I won't do that now. All right, Bryce, let's see. I think we can go back, unless anyone needs a minute. Let's go back to our living agenda and pull that up. All right, so welcome back, everybody, from break. What did it say, Michelle? Quite a lot of pull requests you got in over the break.
I know.
I guess having us not around is helpful, maybe.
Nope, it actually is all about brain stuff. It was driving me crazy that no one was around. I was just like, oh my God, where can this energy go right now? So I also went through and closed a bunch of my tabs in my browsers, so made some good use of it.
All right, I'm going to add my configuration customizability stuff and not be selfish and make it take most of the meeting, hopefully. So let's see. So yeah, let's start with our regular process of just going through and adding items that people might want to discuss today. And then we can go through and figure out timing and see. We had a short admin meeting, so we should have some time to go through it. I think we're done. This means we're done with this. We don't have to discuss it, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, it was in case we didn't cover it in the.
Cool. Add that to the end, so it's still listed there, but.
Okay. Yeah.
Something we'll think will come first. Anything that just out loud anyone wants to say what we're looking at this stuff be typed in that they want to talk about today? Anything that happened, Michelle, that you worked on that you need to discuss more over the break, any of your pull requests that didn't get done or that you wanted to talk about that you did before we finalize it? I know there was one situation where there were competing pull requests, but I think it was also resolved by a pull request you did upstream that got merged, right?
Right. So the question with that is, can we just close the issue? Is it sufficient? Is the upstream? I mean, there's the issues, right? There's all the pull requests I made. I'd love them to get looked at. So, and I can list some of that. But like if we want to just manage issues and pull requests, I'm also excited about that. But I made a pull request on Lily's fix for the phone number validator. It was just such a long time. And I
so well right now we're just like trying to generate some agenda items, but yeah, I think that's a good one to add in.
Sure.
Bryce, Lily, any items you wanted to add in? Michelle, if that's a good summary of the agenda item at least.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything in. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lily.
Were you saying that you had one to add, Lily, or that you didn't? I couldn't quite hear.
Oh, no, item 2 is good enough. It's actually very good.
Okay.
It involves a lot of questions as well. So.
Perfect. All right. So let's see. Well, let's see. Let's take I think the answer, Michelle, to your question about the open pull requests on assembly line is contingent on someone being able to run the untagged release, right? Jonathan had a commit that's not in a tagged release yet. That solves this upstream.
I think we should, until it's actually merged, and the thing is, I'm not sure we should pull. I don't know if we can test. Yeah, if it can be tested, then that's great. I don't think we should just close the issue sight unseen, but I don't know what the next step
is. I understand that. I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying that is relevant. We can't really act on this until that's been tested. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I tested it. I made it and tested it. So it seemed to work to me, but I think it is an untagged release.
Let's see.
Yeah, because it just got merged this morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, then definitely in that case. All right. Yeah. Okay. So he merged it, which is great. but there's not been a new tag since then. Cool. I think hopefully he'll get a bug fix for this other issue I noticed before he tags another release, but who knows? Doesn't matter. Okay, so I think the answer is we can't really review that one. Is there anything about any other closed PRs that you wanted to talk about? Just want to make sure that anything that you needed to talk about synchronously from all the work you did in the last 10 days, we address here, so you're not blocked on it.
Sure.
I didn't notice those were both drafts, but okay.
Well, I turned them
changed
into
it to a draft.
drafts so that no one would merge them.
Not this one. Yeah,
I don't think there's ones here that I feel blocked on. There's testing ones that need work, like need reviewing, but I don't know if we have time for those. And there are open questions, one of which I put as an issue to discuss here. But there are definitely like lots of questions for the testing framework that I would love to have group discussions about. And some like other input about some of them more or less, kind of, I think people would be more or less interested in some of them, but.
All right.
There are lots of discussion items there.
Sounds like a good place to pause that discussion then. And then let's try to have a constrained demo, but a demo of the draggable table updates then from Lily. It seems like the next thing for us to go to.
All right. Share my screen. The two updates I want to show you, one is the visuals for the table, and one is that currently when you click the back button, the data stays. So that's a big breakthrough. I'm happy about that. But then after that, I still have a lot of issues. So I'll go through them one by one. So, this is the visual. So when you move through the rows, the color changes. And also I added an icon here. I first tried Found Awesome things that Quinn and I went through, but I could not make them work. Eventually, I found a way that you could use CSS to add it, but it looked so ugly. So I gave up and just made a little icon as a background. There's still a little bit of lineup issue.
I think we can try and fix that before we actually we merge it in.
But I just want to show you right now what's the lineup problem. So right now here looks like there's a lot of space here between this and this, but when you go to a fields table, you'll see now it disappears. It's because this is much wider, so we squish this together. So that's one thing. And then another is that here we have 3 lines. So this one on the lineup is awful. So there's really work to do for this one, but that's not a big thing. So that's so much about the visuals. So that's the.
Do you want to show us the dragging, the reordering part? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
The ordering part. Okay, so we're going 1, 3, 5. Now if I go to continue. Back 1, 3, 5.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is good, but then immediately I have more problems because we have the next screen, which is the field screen. When you come here and then you go back, we lose this. And that I don't even know we have any way to avoid. Maybe we could just tell them, go adjust the fields first, then adjust the screen. Because otherwise, basically what happens is that this now becomes a fresh new screen load. Therefore, we lose the older, we lose the adjustment that we made earlier.
Screen load shouldn't be it should be a screen load.
Screen load. I show you
Yeah.
why. I
Mhm.
show you why. So here I have 2 hidden fields that's used to save data to pass between the back button. So right now I'm on like a fresh new screen node. Okay, so I go from a prior screen, go to current screen. This is blank. Now I start to make change. This is filled up. If I go continue, come back, I still have it here. That's why the order stayed. But if I go here and then come back, it's blanked out. So it becomes a fresh screen node.
Yeah, I think, but if we were saving, that means that the variable that is in that field is not being saved on the DocAssemble server, and that's what we really need, is for those values to be saved on the DocAssemble server.
This is a field on the screen that is the backend, right?
So if we look at the variables and values on this page, can we see that variable and value?
I show you with the variable definition. So this is this field.
Mm-hmm.
So this value is saved through JS.
Is set in the field through JavaScript. Sure.
Right. So it does save it to the backend. That's why
can we look at the variables and values though and see what its value is right now?
Right.
Can we look at the variables and values? Like when you hit next, hit continue.
Edit, right?
Well, I think after we hit next.
Edit. Well, because from what I understand, continue is the thing that sends those values back to the server, whereas edit
which is why I want to look at like the variables and values and see if it's set on the server.
Back, it's still here.
Up here, up at the top, right? Variables and values. So right here. So let's look for that variable. Does anybody else have ideas for why it's like
it's not saving?
Like why it's like why going to the edit screen like does not submit that value?
Because going to the edit screen is not like the continue is the thing that would send a post to the server that says these are all the values that were filled in. Edit isn't going to do that. Edit's going to do something else. This is where I'm not exactly familiar with what exactly is happening, but I do know something different would happen such that, and at least it makes sense that if something's different happening, it's just not sending that value.
I see.
If there's like a form around it, it's a different form. So that's one potential explanation. If it does,
yeah.
If it's just like it looks like a button and it's just firing off some JavaScript event, it doesn't also do a post when you click the edit button.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is really great. And this actually, I never know.
Maybe there could be a separate screen for editing the fields. Like there's a screen for ordering the fields, and then there's a table for editing the fields. So here there wouldn't be the edit button. There would just be the
edit button. I mean,
and then there'd be a different page for that.
I'm not sure who uses the edit button right now. Although I guess, I mean, this is a good place for us to think about like what some of the features of the Weaver are, right? And the streamline, how we try to optimize it. So
the edit button seems, not that it's not useful, but it is one of those things of at least from this screen, you're like most of these fields, the screens will already, you'll have written out yourself. Or they'll be like auto, is this doing like overrides yet? Like if it's detecting that we need to fill in a name, is it automatically allowing you to edit the name screen yet, or no? Because that's the only time that I
No,
think
it doesn't
someone
do that. No.
Okay, I was gonna say that's the only time I feel that someone would actually edit this on or edit that screen.
Well, what it really
in the same
mostly does is it lets you change the order of the screen, of the fields on that screen.
I think it might also be nice if it were clear that it's just changing the order of the YAML blocks, not the order of the screens, because like it
That's
doesn't
not what it
actually
does, though.
control
No,
the
it is
flow.
changing the order of the
It does
screens,
change
isn't
the
it?
order of the screens.
But for example, if there's a variable required in an earlier question that actually requires the answer from a later screen, that's not going to stop DocAssemble from changing the order.
True, but that feels
We're
like
not
kind of
doing
beyond
it.
the scope of
Yeah.
Okay.
like explaining how DocAssemble works. I don't think is something we can really
Okay.
ask the Weaver to do. I mean, we could decide like, okay, we want people to use this who have no idea what DocAssemble is, but that's not really the
Okay.
current use case.
Sure.
Okay.
Uh,
Now, I think I do want to continue the discussion of that field the table screen, because I think I mentioned the bug I discovered last time when we had the meeting. I didn't have the time to show you. Now I show you. So I just came here as a fresh load, screen load. Now, if I go to 3, okay, this is 3 fields here. I go to 3 here. I do continue. Now I go to 5. This one I supposed to should have 5. I don't see 5. I see 3. So that's the bug right now. Without
display bug, you're saying like, oh, okay. I think I get it. Oh, hit back again. So you're saying you clicked the one for 5, screen 1 rather, right? That's, I guess, the most important part, screen 1 that you're editing. And but when you click edit, you actually go to screen 2. Is that right?
Right.
So click the edit button again and let's
Yeah.
see.
Right.
It comes out correct. Yeah, so see it's screen 1 here.
The title is
what do you-
correct, but the fields aren't
But the
correct?
fields are wrong.
No, the title is also wrong.
Well,
Go back.
title screen 1 is
It's not wrong. It's just that we've been taken to the wrong screen to edit.
Yeah, it's just so confusing. It's just so confusing.
No,
This
it's the
field is
correct
right.
one, screen 1.
It's a good wrong name
Oh,
is right, but
wait.
fields is wrong.
That's weird. That's very
Right.
weird.
Very weird. Now,
It is.
okay, now let's start from a fresh load again.
Can we
But this
inspect-
time I show
oh,
you
maybe
if
it's
we
not.
use the back button, we don't have this issue.
I mean, what do you think about asking? So I originally asked Jonathan to add those little up arrows, which I think are something. They're not a very good UX if you have more than like 5 items. But he added it. Do you think this might be a place for us to pause our work and say, hey, here's what we're trying to do? You with working with the DocAssemble internals could get this to work a different way. What do you? I just want to float that idea. That's always an option because Jonathan does like to work on features the way he wants them to work. And he has a lot of power to make this happen a way that will avoid some of the issues, like with the way the edit button works. That's one thing to think about. Another thought is, I'm okay with removing this edit button here. And we just have to decide, is that an important feature for people to use in the Weaver? And if so, should we shift where it gets asked? Like we could have it be after you create the screen, you get a chance to rearrange that screen. It just means a lot more review screens. It could slow people down.
I think we might just have another screen like this that lets you edit the screens.
Well,
without letting you drag the screens around. Like those would be 2 separate things. So we don't have a ton of, there's just one more review screen. Because like,
well, pause.
I don't
So
know,
I'm trying to think about it.
okay.
So like the more you say, the harder it is to think about what you're saying.
sure.
Not adding more, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's an easy intervention for us to do right now, as far as just solving this particular issue. Lily, does that, interact with the bug that you were just showing us at all or not? Is it the edit button being clicked that triggers the issue? Would it solve
Yeah.
two problems to
Yeah,
basically?
definitely.
Well, let's do that then. Let's just add another screen for now, because that's less of a UX change. I'm not sure how well that will flow ultimately for people when it's so far removed and there's two separate actions you're being taken. Maybe it's going to be easier because there's only one thing you're being asked to review per page than our current setup. So
it's just review. It can just help me understand, because I don't have as close relationships with the students as you guys have. So when they use the Weaver, in terms of these two screens, these two tables, the screen table and then fields table, how do they find them like useful? Do they find them really useful?
do people find this useful right now? That's what you're asking?
Yeah.
I don't know if people can understand it now. So actually, even people who've used it a lot, like, so for example, I was like demoing this to someone with Mia the other day, and she uses the Weaver quite a lot. And she was like, can you explain what this screen does? So right now, I don't think anyone knows what it does.
Okay.
I don't know if students in my class have used it or not. I'm not sure.
Okay, right. So maybe that's something we can have more discussions with them and see where the real needs are. I mean, from us, theoretically, we think that this could be convenient, but if it poses so many technical challenges and if it doesn't really address people, I mean, if people don't even care much, then I don't know. Is it worse for us to spend energy on it? I mean, I'm glad with what we have for this the table order changes. I think that would be useful in other places for sure.
Maybe a good question that might be more answerable at this point is less like, do people use the screen, and more do people find it an obstacle that they can't change the order of the screens after they've already set the order, right after they've created the screens? Do people seem to want to do that and not be able to do it?
Well, I think that would be a good question to ask. I do think we also have to keep in mind that what our design goals are with the Weaver too, right? So if one design goal we have is get to a runnable prototype quickly, is it helpful to let people change the order of fields? Is that helpful for getting a prototype that is visually attractive versus without having to go in and customize the YAML?
I mean, I think one quick solution is that we still keep these edit buttons, but instead of going to the list of tables, we actually just go there to let them change the screen name. Then we deal with this the field list separately. I
think that was Michelle's idea, and I think that seems like a good interim thing, just to split the two functionalities. The one that lets you screen that lets you rearrange, and then another one that lists the pages and has the edit button, but doesn't combine the two functions.
Right.
The only thing that I would about that though is that we would have, if you click, let's click on one of these screens, click on the edit button. It's a nested functionality because you can here edit that field prompt too. So if we want to let people rearrange this screen, we'd have the same problem when it comes to editing the fields.
That's true.
So splitting the functionality wouldn't really, we'd have to add, I don't know, add two tables for this function too. It's a bit tricky with actions and DocAssemble. I think it's doable, but it's a bit tricky.
So in other words, we're actually combining 4 functions together.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
But remember that the drag and drop rearranging does work with DocAssemble's native functionality for this, right? So maybe a mock-up of what we think it should look like would persuade. That's why I go back to that idea of persuading Jonathan. But maybe that's irrelevant if it's not very usable.
I mean,
people can't discover the function, what it's supposed to do. It may not matter. You can do it.
Do we know if this is broken even when it's not drag and drop, when the arrows are used? Have we tested that thoroughly?
That's what I thought, but I don't have a version that doesn't have my code. But I showed you that I went back to a fresh, supposedly. Now I'm coming here.
So it might be a bug in both.
Fresh screen mode. I don't move anything. I just go edit, and then we found it.
Sometimes the back button isn't as helpful as it seems, though. But
I think I think the question of, hey, if you're editing something and then you go to an edit page, should your edit of the previous screen be stored in DocAssemble? That's a very like upstream question. I would
maybe,
say that,
although we're manipulating the way that it works, right? Like we have a hidden field, we're using a custom JSON parsing. Like there's a lot we're doing that might not be an upstream issue.
I'm saying that like if one of the functionalities that DocAssemble offers is to let you do this drag and drop on a table with edit buttons, if that is intentional, then is the intention of the functionality to allow you to edit the drag and drop and then click edit and have those have all of that be saved? And if so, and if it behaves that way, then what are we doing differently, right? So
I think we're doing a lot differently, but yeah, if it doesn't work with the stock arrows to rearrange the fields, then yes, there's something we should raise. Am I understanding what you're saying correctly, Michelle?
I think so. I think so.
I think the arrows do work. My memory is that I did test this functionality when we were just using the arrows and everything worked the way I expected, but I didn't run into that bug. It doesn't mean that I might have just not noticed it. So we should double check. I think it works correctly with just Jonathan's arrows, but I don't think it's usable when you have a long list. Like it's really, you can't even tell things move around. There's no animation. And it's very tedious to move something from even item 5 to item 1 would be really hard to do.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's an unusable feature that is upstream, that we have a prototype of how it works. So maybe showing him the prototype is enough to get it to work. A better version of it upstream.
Yeah.
Separate question from, is there a bug in upstream that needs to be fixed to get our code to work? So those are two different questions, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Bryce, did you have a thought?
No.
Okay. Sounds so sad. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I personally think the rearranging feature is something people would benefit from for prototyping. But they may not understand how to use our feature now because of UX issues with our design of any number of UX things we could discover to improve it. But I feel like the purpose matches. I don't know if other people have thoughts about that.
The purpose.
Our goal of letting people do some basic customization in the Weaver. If our goal is to get them to be able to have a runnable prototype.
I mean, I don't see as strong I think it could fit under that purview, but I don't necessarily, it doesn't feel to me like it's a definite, like
so
having a runnable prototype when the screens are in a slightly different order doesn't, I don't know what, like, how important it is that it be like, how pretty does it need to be? Like, how pretty do we want it to be when it comes out, I guess is the question.
I don't think it is. Because I don't think that's actually a pretty question, right? I think,
Okay.
so if we try to follow that along a little bit, I would say potentially having the chance to edit the text that you just wrote 2 screens earlier, that's probably not so important. But being able to change the order of screens, again, you just created the order of the screens. That doesn't seem that important. But being able to change the order of the fields does to me, because if they're in an awkward order, that's really distracting, I think, to people. And we don't have any way for you to customize the order of fields right now, other than this edit button. So
I would say that one of the main things that and maybe the Weaver has changed a lot and it wouldn't be a problem now, but one of the main things that I actually wanted to be able to do was change the text that I'd given to various fields.
You wanted to correct it after you'd done it a few screens earlier?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that means this screen is important, because then you can come here, then you can change it.
Yeah.
Changing the prompts of the fields.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see how the order would be important too. I'm just saying that I did miss that ability when back in the early days. That's something I was definitely looking for.
Well, a lot of people would, I don't think that any of that has changed dramatically. I think the biggest thing probably would be you're familiar with how it works now, so you probably have better prompts. But a lot of people come to the Weaver for the first time in our classes at Suffolk, at least. So they would not have that familiarity to help them not need the edit feature. But they also might not understand when they run through the Weaver that they should edit it. Is it possible that is your experience kind of like, hey, oh, I just remembered that prompt doesn't make sense, but someone who's completely new wouldn't even have that memory of the prompt doesn't make sense until they actually ran it interactively? So
the thing was that it might be someone who's totally new might not know, oh, this isn't what I want. But like one of the common mistakes that I made at the beginning was doing stuff like, what's a good example? Like for a first name field, typing as a prompt, what is your first name? Right? As opposed to like first name, right?
Yeah.
So like to me, like partway through, I was like, oh, yeah, that's not what it should say. Like, it should just say first name. And I don't know, depends who they are and how much they understand or learn in between editing the various screens, right? But
I wonder if there's more visual feedback we can give people about what it will look like. I don't know.
So that's I think if we add the demo picture, this is what a prompt looks like, and this is what your screen will look like. If we add that somewhere, that might help.
I don't think it ever really, I think we had started that. I don't think the one we had really worked anywhere in there, which is why it's not in there now, but there probably is a demo. I'm just thinking might need the real information, but sorry, Lily, what were you going to say? You should.
Okay, would it possible, it just came to me, I have no idea if it's doable. As people finish a screen or just before they leave, we give them a preview button or something that will show them what that screen will look like from the user point of view.
I think that's what Quentin is suggesting. Yeah.
I think, that's a good summary of it.
We could do we could render that to an image probably, and that would be doable.
Render it what?
Every screen, not just one demo separated from what they're going through. Is as they build each screen, before they leave the screen, show them what that screen will look like to the user.
Yeah.
So it would be best if it were real time, like live, right? Like that's the problem.
I could start trying to work on a very fancy JavaScript question renderer. I don't know how fragile it would end up being, but
it feels like it would be really fragile.
Like when you click like a info button, you can go to a different screen just to see what it is, but at least give them some visual. I mean, the best will be side by side.
Yeah.
With their fields on one part of the screen and with the visual of the final screen looks like, how it looks like to the user on the other side of the screen. That's the ideal position. But if not, at least go to a separate screen if they are wondering, if they want to see what the effects are.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting idea, like a preview button, basically, for the people who want it, essentially.
Right, screen by screen, as they go through it.
That's the hardest part, is figuring out like where do we put that in the flow, right? Because if we could definitely do a review of each screen as you create each screen.
For a pop-up screen, is that possible? Because we don't want them to do anything. We only want them to see it.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. Like I don't. It's nice to be able to interact with it, but like this is one of those things of we go down this road and we end up just building a completely better playground, which would be great, but like it could just go in the playground. like a lot of these ideas are really good ideas, and I think they're valid. We're starting to move a bit further from like quickly to a working prototype to polishing and editing your interview.
True.
Like,
yeah, that's a somber thought. I think it's important.
I like all the other things. I like all these ideas, and they're really good things. They would be great to have, but like, do we need them in the Weaver? I guess.
Yeah, we need our ground where we stand. But then it comes back to the question, the basic question. I think we have discussed many times, that how much do we want to complete within the Weaver versus how much room we leave to the developer to modify later in their own playground. Like change the screen or change field prompt.
I feel like people can get it pretty quickly, right?
Later.
I think people do understand how to edit most of the things later. I feel like that's something my students, at least, we've written some more documentation about it. I feel like that's something they can understand or understand quickly with like a short lesson. So it's more about like, I think the hardest part is this quick prototype aspect. When people don't know they're using the Weaver the first time, how quickly can they get something that looks like a prototype of what they want? And how important that is. I mean, we're going a little further afield from Lily, from your demo, but I think this is a good discussion. But this is making me think about this topic and Bryce's point about not overloading features essentially in the Weaver, or that duplicate the playground, or that maybe could be in the playground or in a app builder, right? Like Documate, and why ours is different. What if we just had a JavaScript quick preview that wasn't a separate page, so it didn't slow you down, but it showed visually what it looked like with your content, so it didn't have to be like then read and parsed, understood. That's, I think, the problem with the image. It's like, okay, yes, image is great, it's explanation, but you have to then read it and apply it and understand it to your context. So it's still a thing that people may not grasp right away.
Yeah. No,
because they have to like, it's like the whole thing, like we don't tell people, okay, we're going to teach you the law and then you apply the law to your facts. We're like, we're going to ask you the questions that you get to the conclusion of the law, when we can, instead of making you be a lawyer. Just like, this is the same thing. It's like, we don't want to make you be a designer to understand. Like, you don't have to parse the understanding of a diagram before you try to follow the screen instructions. It feels like kind of an awkward UX thing to do to people when we can avoid it. But a preview that's dynamically updating, very clear and discoverable.
It's when we can avoid it. Like, are we going to make a preview that's dynamic? That's like, there's nothing, an image, a like static image that shows the anatomy, or something that's dynamic.
Right.
Now, I think that can wait on. We have nothing else to do, but
nothing can sometimes be better than something, though, right? Like, that is possible. Because I just want to just highlight that, because I think it's maybe better not to explain something that's very confusing. It'll slow people down and make them give up sometimes. But yeah, that may not be this thing, though. But
so then come back to this particular issue with all those discussions. What I'm thinking now is probably, as Michelle originally suggested, is separate the screen table from the fields table, but we only provide the reordering function, remove the edit. Because edit essentially is those things that can be changed later in their own playground, and which probably,
I mean, all these things can be changed later. I think we just pick which things they can change now.
yeah.
It seems like we had
order is
different
not-
ideas about what we each personally encountered there too, right? Like, so Michelle saying, yep, she had to change the labels a lot. I was thinking, oh, well, the labels don't matter too much. The order matters more. So you get a rough idea of what it looks like. So we may not agree there. But I do think we could streamline it to reduce the functionality that is available in the Weaver already. I think that's a clearer point, which maybe you're saying, Lily, which is you already can create a label the first time. You already can create a screen order the first time. But what you can't do is rearrange the fields on an individual screen, to me.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think whichever ones of these we pick, as long as I'm not particularly attached to any one thing that we prioritize.
Okay, so I'll try to work in that direction and see if there's anything coming up to separate those two tables.
So do you have action items for this, Lily? Like, I think one action item is just to try removing the edit buttons. And I think that it's a trade-off, given how infrequently the screen is probably used, that is probably acceptable if it makes it not be buggy in the behavior. And then the other question is, do we want to try to get this as a prototype upstream to Jonathan to give us feedback on? And then the third task is, well, wait a second, what's the whole usability of this process in general for editing? No matter what, I think we'd want to have the work you're doing to rearrange fields as part of it, because that's feels like if we have any screen reordering, it's going to need to use something like this. So,
But
I just want to make sure you're not blocked before we move on to some of the other agenda items.
okay, let's go slowly. So you're saying first to remove the edit buttons. That definitely cuts off the connection between this table and the next table. But then how are we going to bring, do we want to still keep this table coming up somehow, somewhere?
I can't think of another
So what we were describing before is that if we were to keep the previous screen where you rearrange the screen order, right, we would remove the edit buttons and we would have a separate screen that is basically like this screen, except for you wouldn't be able to rearrange there would be two separate, this would be broken into two steps. One is rearranging the screen order, and the other is just the static table that you can't change the order of that has the edit buttons. So here you'd rearrange the screen order, but there would be no edit buttons. And then we'd add another screen and that would have edit buttons and you wouldn't be able to change the order.
But that still doesn't
We
get
still have the
rid
same
of
problem. Yeah.
of the bug that when you do the continue, it gets confused.
Yeah, it still would have that bug. I mean, I guess, do we want to add two more screens to each
What
screen?
would get
After you
confused?
create the screen, you get the rearrange screen, and then you get the rearrange field screen, and then you get the edit field screen. Was that even the right order?
That's the other thing I think I haven't brought up. In terms of back and continue, which one comes first? So if I go from here to there, then the screen table comes first. But if someone doesn't do that, then that's the end of it. But if someone does it, now if they go either way, now this becomes before that table, right? So
Yeah.
then we are having a problem of deciding,
which function should come first, the edit
right. Which one is the egg? Which
or the
one
rearrange?
the chicken. Because
I'm not clear. I think probably
keep the retain the data.
probably the
I mean, if we
content
have
comes before the order.
if we have a screen that just says, like a review screen that says rearrange screens, edit screen 1, edit screen 2, you know, and then on the edit screen 1, whatever, it's like, you know, rearrange fields. You know, I wish I should write this out in
separate action items to do like those tasks, essentially.
I can try and like write it out. Like,
well, this makes me think maybe what we should do is make this be a screen you have to click to get to instead of always showing intentionally. And it could be on the last page of the interview. And in that context, we could also have a generated image of what the page would look like. So people can get all the way through to the end screen. They see an image of what the screen looks like, then they can click to get the different edit functionalities, rearranging and changing the text. And then we don't have to worry about what order is ideal, as you're saying, Michelle, like that would solve that problem. We don't have to worry about dynamic images to show the contents. It's much easier to just use the YAML or the objects and then generate a rough appearance of it. The only problem that would add that we don't have now is the built-in fields, because we wouldn't really be able to preview built-in fields.
So then a different option would be keep the current flow after they finished all this or their screen building, and we say, do you want like I don't want to just automatically assume they want to go through this field screens for each of their screen. I just ask them, do you want to? If they say I want to, then I give them an option and then they choose which screen they want to. I mean, which screen they want to go into, and that's where they just see one table for that particular screen instead of have all of them listed in one place.
So if you look at the agenda document, I kind of outlined the idea for organizing this differently. So like our, usual users have we could put a review screen at the end, right? Like a review screen that just, I can try and, are you able to see it or should I describe it verbally?
I stop it so you can show whatever you do.
Okay.
So I want to also probably pause this discussion and just make sure we can preview this, but I don't want it to go much longer now to get some of the other agenda items. But as long as we can get to an action item for now, we could revisit some of the discussion because it's definitely raised a lot of important UX issues that I think we can't totally solve today.
So this is what I'm talking about. Like they get to the end. They have one big review screen that offers these I options. Edit the order of the screens, edit screen 1, edit screen 2. If you go to edit screen 1, you get edit the order of the fields, edit field 1, edit field 2, that kind of thing.
Well,
I'm not sure that addresses all the concerns, but it's one way to.
Yeah, I think
that's all.
It's except I don't know.
Okay, I think it does. And I guess it's like, wait, how is this different from the current field? But I guess the difference is you can immediately see the list of fields or screens to edit. Instead of having that that would be the primary task on this review screen, right? And then there'd be one button that takes you to a new screen that's not always shown. That lets you rearrange the order of the
So
screens.
Each of these would just have an edit button. They wouldn't have any interface. Right, you'd press here and that would show
one button for all of them. There's no ability to drag and drop on that page, But otherwise it would be the existing
Drag and
review page essentially without the order arrows.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
I think we are, but yeah, okay.
So like this is item 1, like order of screens, edit button, right? Like,
but we would just show the table that we have now, but without arrows essentially underneath. And then it would be a separate page you go to use the drag and drop table.
Sure, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I wasn't.
There's no reason to have like
table there.
This would just be the table. What you're having as items II and III would just be the table without the arrows.
Sure. Yep. So it would just clarify the flow of like what it is you're editing.
So we're saying have a button that you need to click on to launch the review or the change order of screens, which feels fine. That is kind of like a secondary task. That seems like a good solution.
Okay, cool. I will.
But I wouldn't probably say edit. It would probably just say like change. Well, it doesn't matter. Sorry, that's really minutia. The order of screens button probably wouldn't say edit. It would just say change order or reorder.
Sure.
As the verb. But
I was just trying to clarify that like it wasn't a table where you would reorder the screens. That's all I was trying to clarify.
Yeah. Does that leave you, Lily, with some things to keep going? All the different ideas we talked about?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I think that change is great because actually, regardless of whether we do any of the rearranging stuff upstream or not, it might be a clearer user experience to think of those functions separately.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. That was good. I think it raised some good discussions. I think like in general, we need to start thinking about that, and people might do their own thoughts about usability issues with the Weaver right now, like what things are clear, trying to take from a fresh perspective again, and our reinvigorated goals of like getting you to the useful prototype stage at the end quickly so you can see what would an app for this look like. I think that's our conception right now. The big shift is like we're post that like we want to automate everything at one stage of our project to like we want to make the Weaver useful for projects at all different stages. And then I think in that framework, the Weaver becomes about useful prototype to me. But all right, so that's maybe a broader point. If people want to just think about that, that I think would be helpful to get more thoughts on things we could clean up and make easier.
Personally, just FYI, like, I think that's something I really hesitate to make judgments about without just watching some people use it and see how it's going for them. Just like observe them using it. Like that would be,
I think there's
that process.
Yeah, there's always a gold standard. I think we have to keep in mind that we do have the drawbacks of being experts, but also the advantage of being experts on this. And I think we can trust our usability judgments when they're in a context of being reasoned judgments. And we've taken that empathetic step of saying, okay, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of someone who's not used this before with this goal, right? I think we can do that effectively if we have that mentality as our focus. I don't think we've been using that focus with all of the features that we've added yet. So I think there's value in that exercise. I worry that waiting till we have a user is not, I don't think it's going to happen is the problem. So like, great, that's a good goal, but I don't really see how to get to that.
I thought just some of the students, but yeah.
I don't think I can really ask my students to be guinea pigs in that way. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they are trying to fit this in to like a heavy demand, a project-based class of their time, and their, spring semester is already more stressful for students generally.
Okay.
And I doubt they'll have spare time to give to doing user research. I could try to offer extra credit or something like that. But And the other question is the timing of it. If we have low hanging fruit improvements we can make before they use it, that's great. I don't know if that's realistic timing, but regardless, the point when they're heavily using it is when they'd have the most insights.
All right. I mean, yeah, whatever we can get of that. I don't want to like put pressure on students. So I don't know. Obviously,
if we could think of a constrained
that
session and like, hey, I'll give you extra credit for this. If I was sure it would be like a good experience for them, and I could think of a way to justify extra credit for it, that is a way to make that happen. I don't think it's going to happen organically, so someone needs to set that up. I think that's the only framework in which would happen, but I also don't think we really need that to make some of the fixes that it needs. I think we can use intuition essentially to get pretty far, and then it'll be more valuable to get refining insights from students. But okay, it's just so let me just look at this. So I would like some feedback on a big topic in configuration customizability. And we also had 2 testing questions. Where do you think, how blocked are you, Michelle, on the testing questions? Or given we have like about 10 minutes left, can I raise this design question for configuration? Or do you feel like you can't make progress on these?
I don't know if I'll make progress, but it's not super urgent, I don't think. Not like, I mean, I can just do the ugly solution until we have an answer. So it's fine.
Okay, well,
can we have a longer meeting today?
Let's see. We have a 2 o'clock, but nothing until 2. So I could go a little bit longer. Bryce?
Yeah, I'd be fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess we've had some backed up questions that we had, and this was it was a really good discussion we just had about usability that was beyond the topic that we'd written down for draggable table updates, right? So, right. Can I jump to my question first, and I'll try to limit it, and then we'll have 20 minutes for each one, maybe?
Sure. I may not like have time in the end to stick around, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry. I should have asked. I didn't ask you.
That's okay. Yeah, I just have some errands to run, but we can come back to the main one. I made a PR for number 5, so that discussion can happen there too. But it's not super urgent. That's not the one I want to address. I'd rather address the other one. But we can just do your thing. It was just like I need to edit the image as well, and I don't know where the image is, and was that the intended link? But that's not the one I want to address. So
okay, back in the PR, that's easy. Hopefully, or at least it's not really discussion item.
Yeah. So I think we can just do your thing, and then we can cover mine at some future date if we next week or something.
You have to sign off early, and we've all said we can stay a little bit longer. And we can preview this briefly, and then
sure.
I think it'd be good to get your insights and the other question I had, but we could try to get you some progress first. All right. So allow devs to download the JSON variables of an interview.
So Michael, context is Michael was trying to troubleshoot something, and he wanted to see what the JSON variables were. And there's no reason that we can't do that right now without the API, but maybe in the future with the API. But then the question is, where do you put it? Because that object can be really huge. So do you just stick it in the report, with some kind of pretty print, and then you have a few huge JSON objects in the report? Do you save it to a separate file? That kind of thing. And I was hesitant to add it to make an official PR with it as a step when the place I have it right now is in the middle of the report. That's all. It's not urgent.
So the idea is you run an automated test, you want to let someone see the JSON that the test produced, right? The JSON representation of the interview state.
At whatever step they were. So they're on page 3 and they say, the developer says, log the JSON on this page, right? Log the variable values on this page.
It would be a step someone had to invoke intentionally.
Yes. We could also I hadn't thought of having one automatically at the end. That's kind of a different question, and that I think would make sense in a kind of separate file.
I think that would only work or I think it would only be useful for an error screen, but it doesn't, would it work for the error screen? I know there are some errors that you can't get the variables on.
Yeah, not always.
It doesn't get the right state. It gets state back if there was an error on the server or something.
I mean, this is a totally much longer and deeper question, but we can definitely store the JSON variables of the most recent question and then save that if there's an error. But that is a completely, that might take a bit more conversation than that's going to take a longer conversation than what I had planned. That's a good issue. If you want to make that issue, if you want to add that issue in, or I will later or something, but I like the idea.
If this is a thing, sorry, I was just my mental issue. If this is a thing that the developer's invoking as opposed to something that's automatically happening, if they're invoking it, they will know where to find it. I think this, if it was something that automatically was happening, or if it does eventually happen on an error, that it might for discoverability purposes could be in the log. But if you're manually invoking this should be in the same place as all the other archives
report stuff. So basically, stuff, yeah. So if you've chosen up to blow up your report with a giant JSON object, then be it on your head.
Which one's the files? I was gonna say, which ones where do all the where do the screenshots go? What are those called again?
The screenshots are just saved individually. The screen IDs with the variables set are saved in the report.
I'm thinking, I'm sorry. I think I was saying that they should be saved separately as separate files. And if you're manually invoking them, you will know where to find those separate files in the GitHub action. And it should not blow up your report because I do think it will make the report unusable if we have the entire prettyfied JSON for however many steps you wanted to look at it. It would be very difficult to find that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can just name them step N or whatever, right?
I would use the same file name convention, which uses the scenario description.
Yeah.
As well as some other information to name files based on where they are. So yeah, it would need to have the step as well because it can just be a scenario name. Okay, that's a good point. All right. Yeah, it would need a unique name per step that it was used in.
Basically the consensus we came up to, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, there's a whole question about the structure of the output documents, but I can ask that a different day. There's a different issue for that I will bring up a different day.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Great. Yeah, well, that was actually quite quick, but I appreciate that discussion. All right, so I think I did some demo of the things that I thought we could customize the last time we met. And then I've just evolved a little bit more in one aspect I don't think we had a chance to discuss together. But just as a reminder, the basic idea is I'm going to go to one of the files that has some of the customization so you can see what it looks like. Each package can provide something like a list of choices for jurisdictions and organizations that's additive. So you can add, by creating one of these files, you get to list more options someone can choose from to add to their interview. The other thing that it doesn't do yet, but that it will eventually, is it would give you options for things that seem like they're more like, hey, you chose the brand or style for this run of the Weaver, and it is like you choose from a menu and it just takes one set of those choices. So things like the template for next step files, the list of variable names that are parsed and recognized inside that document as being built-in fields, and then the list of the actual output of the document. So originally I was thinking that's the basic structure of what I think people should be able to customize for their use of the Weaver. And the idea is you could have one of these files for your organization. You might have 5 or 6 on one installation of the Weaver, or you might just have one that's for your own use, and you have some ability to customize those so that you don't have to fork the Weaver to make it look like what you want your output document to be. You can just change these files and change the advertised capabilities. This is where I was starting to think about and needed some more insight from the group, which is right now we have an output patterns file, which is a bunch of blocks that then get used in code in the interview. And I was like, oh, well, let's add another layer of abstraction there. Let's make that be something that you can use. You can change the order of the blocks too in another YAML file. As I was starting to think about that, it started to make less sense to me to do that. And it felt more like what we should do is change the output pattern to be the only document that controls both the order and the overall structure of the output. So we would have, I don't really remember why we didn't originally use this design, but we basically have a template file, which is like the, interview.yaml template. We might use some Mako defs, which are like Jinja macros, to control like repeated blocks, like the style of the code block, etc. But basically there would be one file that controlled the interview that's generated. And it would be a mix of the blocks that get repeated and the ones that are used once. It would just use Mako, and it would be something we could integrate with DocAssemble's template system. So it would be, it wouldn't be in the sources folder, it would be in the templates folder instead. I'm just curious what people think about that and the value of it. So to me, I think it makes it simpler if we're going to have this task of letting people customize that file at all. It doesn't really make sense to add a new file. It makes more sense to have one file. But it's another refactor where there's a chance for things to break because we're redoing code that's working now. And I will say, like, one thing I'd want to do is take the extra step of removing a bunch of the small methods that we added to the interview generator that handle things like showing the fields list. I don't remember what the functions are named anymore, but we would move those into the Mako as well. So we could remove some complexity in the module file. We would remove having to think about an interface to the various little templates, because these little templates have different interfaces, like the variables they're expecting you to use aren't necessarily consistent in every instance. So it feels like it'd be a good simplification, but it's a refactor and there's some risks there. So I'm just curious if people have thoughts about if I need to explain what I'm talking about in more clarity, if I didn't explain clearly like what I'm suggesting we do, and what thoughts people have about the value of that. And I could go into more of my reasoning if I didn't explain any of that part too. That's essentially the question.
I have a thought about the.
You're very quiet to me, Lily. So I don't know if it is for everybody. But...
Oh, sorry. Is it better now? Hello?
Yeah, I think I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. All right. Can we go back to that configuration file? Yeah, this one. No, the other one.
The other one, okay.
Right. So the way I understand it, which can be wrong, is that this is configured on the organization level, right? So the items you have there make sense. But to include the output pattern in this file or as part of this is kind of confusing to me, because the output pattern is more, it controls the individual interviews. In other words, the developers should have the choices to whatever they want if we allow any configuration. So instead of putting them on an organization level, they should be staying out of it. So that's my first confusion.
Good point. So you're saying it wouldn't be like a one. Well, I was thinking each run of the Weaver, you could control it. But I think maybe what you're saying is that you should be able to have more than one version of it inside this file. Is that right?
No, this file, I think, okay, this goes from the top. It's, right now you have two big items here, right, in this file. So one is the, right, so the jurisdiction choice and organization choices. So those are on the level that's above individual interviews. In other words, one person makes that decision, everyone else is spared of it. Just forget about it. You don't have to think about it. The decision, the choice is made for you, or at least the possibility of the choices is restricted by this higher level, right?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's helpful for me to just pause and to clarify one thing, which is that I'm not saying that you need to choose one because it's an organization level package for your whole organization. It's more like you're saying these are available. And my concept was different organizations would publish their own set of capabilities, but there's no reason that they would need to enforce only one per organization. Is that?
But maybe then that's where I can confuse. Why is it necessary to have this separate thing built up here? I thought it's so that someone else on a higher level can make certain decisions and then everyone else in that organization don't have to.
Well, right now we only let you control like the order of questions and which fields go into your interview, right? There's a lot of stuff that's just hard coded in our YAML file that you don't get to control or configure. So it doesn't really matter if it's like a per configuration or a per developer choice. You can't change it right now. Things like the interview metadata block, maybe as an example, the fact that that we're using AL document, maybe as an example. Like all those things are hard-coded preferences that we made. Which the point is, we have a template for the output interview that we controlled. And we made choices to save people time, but maybe they want to have their own template that controls those choices, that fits their needs better. Whether it's like an organization level choice or they just want to have like, hey, today I'm doing a interview that generates a document. Tomorrow I'm doing one that is just a triage tool. It doesn't generate any output document. And maybe they want to have different versions of the output YAML for those two scenarios.
Okay, I think that clarifies my confusion. I was separating them as
Do you think this makes me realize output patterns should be a list? It's not one per organization, though. Another thought that I had is, should variable names be ever controlled separately from the choice of organization package and jurisdiction package? Probably not.
That's interesting. Well, since this is a template, then the name should not be specific, should be more generic, right?
Explain what you mean.
Okay, well, maybe I'm thinking. Oh, so description, and then Massachusetts is not a field name, in other words. It's just a text. Okay.
Yeah. So you could have more than one thing that said Massachusetts. Those don't have to be unique. It's just this needs to be unique, I guess. Include name. Okay.
So then when you're saying the okay. Variables, can you give some example? What variables are you talking about?
Sure. So it would just be what we currently have inside generator constants. So that list of, okay, we recognize signature date, docket number, trial court, etc. The things that were like, hey, we're not going to parse those as being fields you need to assign a name to in the Weaver. They're going to be automatically done by your runtime package. That's what would be the variables. And I this is something I'm thinking I would work on in phases. So we don't have to do this functionality yet, but something that seemed like it would be useful right away as a next thing to do after changing the list of organization choices would be changing the list of changing the output template. And then the last thing seemed to be like people have asked for changing the list of variables that get recognized. Those were the common kinds of customization tasks people talked about after we did our demo at DocaCon.
So for example, like a Boston Municipal Court that would not apply in another state, so they won't have their own name. Is that the kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, and I think someone, I don't remember if they gave me an example of the fields they wanted to add, but they wanted to add more fields that the Weaver would skip. They're like, hey, I have my own set of standard variable names. Can I have the Weaver skip those when I run my document through the Weaver so that I don't have to get assigned them a new field name? I want to use the same label or prompt every time for that field. Can I hard code it in the Weaver process? So like people will want to change this list of variables. Actually, that's one of the things we identified early on, is that this would be something people wanted to customize. And I'm thinking now that it should be a YAML file and not a .py, but
yeah, that would be much easier to modify. Another thought is that maybe separate into two categories. One is that everyone will need it, regardless, like name, birthday, email address, those whatever that everyone will need it. And then another pile would be variables that are contextual. It depends on what the interview is about. People may not need it, or they may call it something else. So I think we may want to treat them separately. Because if we make everything customizable, I don't know if that would will force us to make a lot more changes than necessary. But
Yeah.
if that's not the case, then we can make everything customizable. But otherwise, I would say maybe we separate into two kinds.
I mean, I think that's worth thinking about too, because one of our goals is standardization. And if we force everyone to standardize on a core set of variable names, if they want to use our Weaver tool, that actually, it's better than saying like, oh, I wanted to use username without an underscore because it's what my documents already said, right? That would actually decrease standardization. So that's another thing to think about there too.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
Those are really helpful thoughts. I don't know how quickly I'll get to the variable names part. It seemed straightforward, at least, so I didn't need to ask questions about it as much. These were really good thoughts, though, that will help enhance it. But what about that design question of the value of replacing the output patterns file with a file that is like one template that's for the whole interview? I'm wondering if either you or Bryce have any thoughts about that.
Quick thought was okay. I think output patterns right now, the memory I had was controlling the Weaver's output within certain boundaries. In other words, our main Weaver logic is not flexible. It's not reflected in this file. Eventually, to me, in my mind, I always think of the Weaver as two layers. One layer is the Weaver logical tree, which we don't have much conditions right now, but eventually we will need to add the conditions. Another is within the output files, there are certain options you could turn on or off or reorder or whatever. For example, the document generated, that kind of thing. So that's two separate layers. One is the Weaver logic, one is the generated interview logic. So eventually they both are customizable. Do we want to handle them all in one place in this file or not? That's my first question. And secondly, you said something about, I think before the break, you were going to use the something called a def, and the function macro, whatever, I forget.
Yep.
So that's the one you're going to change, right?
So here's the idea is like, so some of these are blocks that we use once. Some of them are blocks we use again and again. So a question block would be an example of something we'd use again and again, right? Every question uses the same basic structure, right, where it has the ID, the question, sub-question, and then fields. But then some of the screens are only used once, like the preview screen, download screen, etc. There's only one of those. So the ones that are used again and again would become defs. The ones that are only used once, you would just put in the order inside the output pattern YAML where we think it should go.
Right. Yeah, I think at that time I thought about it, I thought it was a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. Use different macros.
As far as like what we would do in the output patterns file, I think we did kind of decide we don't need to give people ultimate flex. Like there might be some things that I guess we could probably let the interview output pattern file trigger things like optional sections, I guess. Something to think about. Some of the things you can imagine would be interactive things that happen in the Weaver, and some of them are like passive things that we just control where they appear or how much detail they have, but they don't prompt new questions when you run the Weaver. And some of them are things that require extra input, right? So how do we let people add a question that needs extra input? I don't really know. You probably don't have to do that first as a first priority, but it's something.
No, not now, but down the road. Because
at least like to turn something off that they're not using. We don't want to force a question about something that doesn't really get needed. It's not really needed by the Weaver, or to have an awkward order of questions because the Weaver, the output pattern file triggers it in a weird order, but we want to control it for a better user experience.
Yeah, definitely. I know we will not do everything at the day one, but it's just because you are saying this is a design question, then that's why I brought it up. That from the long-term point of view, would this be the place that would handle both layers? So that's basically my question. But it doesn't have to be answered now. It's just something else, something to think about.
No, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think I'm okay with saying, okay, we'll just choose customization points because customization comes with a cost, right? So we could say, hey, we're going to let you change the layout and order and maybe contents of some of these blocks, but we'll control the things that can be totally customized as feature requests in the Weaver, rather than letting you say, I'm going to add a, I don't know what would be a good example, but like a calculator widget in there. Like, okay, we don't have the questions for that. We're not going to let you add that as a new step in the Weaver without making a pull request to the Weaver to add that. Well, I feel like we had a little bit of a discussion the last time we met. It's been 2 weeks about what things people would want to customize. We kind of touched on that a little bit already, like what things we want to do first. And we can add new customization points as they come up, I think. But overall structure, Bryce, did you have, you unmuted, did you have a thought about that overall idea of making a single output pattern file?
I didn't have any like in-depth thoughts besides just that it seems like a good idea to at least start on, even if it is like a big refactor, because yeah, like the way things are now is kind of not inflexible, but a lot. So
okay, it'll be our third refactor. It probably deserves a new version number, but that's okay. I guess it's like our core thing we're working on.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember why we didn't originally do this. It seemed like there was a really compelling reason to go with our design of, I don't really know why though. I think mostly the answer is probably because we were just doing things in a hurry. And the change we made to having a separate output pattern file was the smallest change from our original design choice. And maybe also the structure of the original wizard that Jonathan made was closest to that. That might be the two reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my thought is I'm going to do this in 2 stages where I think the configuration stuff is almost ready. Like the overall framework of, hey, here are the files you can configure. And it's mostly just the dependency list. Is the only implemented configuration choice you can make. So I feel like that's essentially ready to merge, or maybe not. Maybe in a day or so it'll be ready to merge. And then from what I'm hearing, the next pivot would be to change this output pattern file. That's at least a thing I'd be more ready to tackle as a next challenge. And then finally, then the next thing would be the variables.yaml file. And there are some good ideas about what that should look like. I'm thinking that the variables.yaml should potentially live inside this package, this jurisdiction choice and organization choice package. So like choosing that, but the problem is that no, that's too far downstream from how we want to let people run the Weaver and give them. Yeah, go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I was just, I think, about to say the same thing, if that feels a bit far. And like I said, because essentially this is still, like these customization hooks are still technically at like an organization level. And so I don't think they need to be, like Weaver specific stuff shouldn't go in what are essentially runtime packages. So.
Oh, okay, good point. Yeah, that's splitting this. But it is like really tightly coupled though, right? Because you're saying the runtime package will have this capability. So don't try to do it in the Weaver.
It's a fair idea, but
well, on the other hand, maybe there'd be a lot of repetitiveness. Like maybe one organization would have 10 runtime packages they wanted to choose from. But they always wanted to have the same core list of variables. So I could see reasons to keep it one separate dependency too. And there's not any way, well, I guess we could, no, not really. We could parse, go ahead, Lily, yeah.
I was thinking, can we because this is admin work, can we add interview to the dashboard, but then at the end of that interview, save this file into the Weaver. That way they have a nice interface. You don't have to go into this
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think here's what let me just demo you one thing, which is, let's see. So right now, I'm thinking this is going to be integrated into the Weaver itself. So not a separate visit to the dashboard, but that someone could add dependencies this way. That felt to me like the main thing someone would want to do that wouldn't require editing a package anyway. But what are some other things you think people would want to do interactively, Lily? So, because like some of them, it feels like you really wouldn't, you'd need to spend more time making sure they worked, right? Like the output pattern, you don't really want to upload an output pattern. Like that's okay to make people go through the process of making a GitHub package for that, but.
No, sorry, I think it's my mistake. I thought they would come to this file itself and modify directly, but you are providing interface already.
I am thinking that somebody would create a YAML file like this for their organization or for whatever purpose they needed to have different packages that provided different abilities, but mostly per organization. They would edit a file like this, and there could be like 10 of them on one server, and it would be able to let you choose between which of those, like today, do you want to generate a Louisiana interview or a Massachusetts triage tool, right? Like you would make that choice at runtime to say which one you're going to use, but someone would have created this YAML file originally to produce it. This interface here that I'm showing is just for like ad hoc choices someone might make. I'm not sure how often people use it.
Right. So then my thought was like, okay, if we create an interview on a dashboard, then you can combine these two steps into one. All they do is go through an interview, and the file is created for them with their own addition or whatever, and saved into their Weaver version.
It's an interesting idea. I don't know if it's an interesting idea. I'm trying to decide if someone would use that. Like who would be in a
Because
position where they
it's
want to
all
customize
admin
it?
work.
And then save it?
That's my main motivation because it's admin work. I want to train people think, okay, if it's admin work, I go to the dashboard.
Yeah. Well, anything that we can think of, we could have. We wouldn't have to make them make a YAML file. So I was thinking this would live as a server-wide setting. Someone could come in who is an administrator and add more dependencies for that server. And then we could think of other configuration choices that are like that we wanted to let people add dynamically and make them available server-wide. Maybe the variables would be the next.
Where is
This is saved into the database on that server.
So it's separate from that YAML file?
Yes. It's using a DA store. So like the architecture is this YAML file is advertised on the server. Like, hey, I'm a package that can customize the Weaver. Use me if you want to. That's the advertising step. So if I go back here, you'll see there's two packages that have advertised themselves that way. There's the AL Weaver, system-wide AL Weaver, and then there's my playground version of the AL Weaver that have said, hey, I have some abilities that you can use to customize your server. So that's the main way I think people should interact with this ability, is by creating their own package, which produces that advertisement, and then it includes the YAML file. But I think people might make very small customizations interactively too. And for now, all I was thinking that would involve would be things like adding additional items to the list of packages that are runtime dependencies.
So when you add it to that, they go back to the screen and you'll see that's added to there.
You'll see like a merged list of both choices, the ones that were added manually and the ones that would come from a YAML file.
Okay. Okay, I was missing that part.
Okay, well, I think I have a good direction to keep working on now. It feels like that is the right choice. I'm going to work on finishing up this testable. I might not work on this part right away, but because it's not, no, it might be the part that's more useful for someone to use right away rather than to create their own YAML file. So maybe I will add that quickly. I don't know to think about that. But oh, I think I know what to do next anyway. So thank you for the discussion.
Good.
I'll try to post some questions if anyone has any other thoughts, or people have any other thoughts that come up with this that they didn't get a chance to say. Feel free to add on Teams or on the issues or reach out to me. But all right, thanks everybody.
Sounds good. See
Thank
y'all.
you.